Hi everybody, it's Dan and welcome back to my kitchen. Today we're going to be whipping up a Sailor Moon inspired cake with the simple chocolate cake recipe, fluffy vanilla buttercream, simple fondant decorations, and all of it's going to come together for one amazing, delicious, nerdy cake. I'll be sure to throw a link to the full recipe down below in the description, along with my tips, tricks, everything you might need to whip this up right in your own kitchen. Plus, while you're down there, don't forget to like, subscribe, click the bell to receive notifications every time I post a new video. Now for our doll cake, we are just gonna have 2 layers, but if you want to split up this doll cake form into 3 layers or 4 layers, definitely feel free to go ahead and do so. But for today, we're gonna go ahead and just use 2 layers. So before we stack them together, we're gonna add a generous helping of this dreamy vanilla buttercream, smooth it out, and add our top layer of cake. Once your cakes have been filled and stacked, it's gonna be time to start our crumb coat. Now our crumb coat is gonna be a very thin layer of frosting used to glue our crumbs down, sealing the cake's moisture, which is going to be super useful if you need to store the cake before decorating, and provide an even base for additional buttercream. It's basically a delicious primer for your cake masterpiece that keeps the cake on the cake side and the frosting on the frosting side. So for our crumb coat, we're going to use an offset spatula and spread a thin layer of frosting over our cake. It should be thin enough that you can see the cake and crumbs through it, and don't worry about any visible crumbs. Just smooth the icing as best as you can and let it dry until it crusts over or feels dry to the touch. And because we are going to be using fondant today, we want to go ahead and make sure that our cake is completely cooled. A hot cake will melt the crumb coat. And we also want to try to do one more layer of frosting over our crumb coat before draping on our fondant. This is really going to help the fondant stick to the cake. Once we have that crumb coat on our doll cake, we're going to go ahead, we're going to grab our fondant and begin to cover. So for this Sailor Jupiter cake, I am going to be using a Kelly green fondant. This way I'm really capturing those core colors of Sailor Jupiter. And what I did was just roll out my fondant and cut out about an 8-inch wide circle. Now usually, because I am using a 6-inch round doll cake form pan, I would cut out a circle that's a little bit wider, but I wanted to make sure that the fondant for our Sailor Jupiter cake was draped enough, this way we can pipe roses underneath our fondant once we are at that point. So when you're ready, just go ahead, bring your fondant over to your cake and gently lay it on top, then smooth it out while shaping it to give the bottom of your cake that kind of that dress motion, as if our Sailor Jupiter cake is going to be jumping right into action. Now when it comes to your fondant, we've used a lot on the channel before, so I'm not going to bore you too much with little clips of me rolling out the fondant. Just keep in mind that your fondant should be about 1/8 inch thick. It is susceptible to tearing and cracking, so it's important to use even pressure and not go too fast. And no worries if you don't get it perfect right away, because we had a nice thin layer of crumb coat. If you feel like it's not perfect or to your liking, just carefully remove it, re-knead your fondant, re-roll it out, and re-drape over your cake until it is just to your liking. Once you're happy with how your fondant is laying on your doll cake, we're going to move on to that next step. Grab your doll and let's get her secured right into her cake. Once we have our doll secured in our cake, let's go ahead and take our fondant and begin to work on the upper half of our doll cake. First up, we're going to take our white fondant. We're going to roll it out lengthwise and we're going to cut out 2 identical 3 to 4 inch strips and drape them on top of our doll and connect them to the bottom half of our fondant dress. And this way, our next piece of fondant will have something to stick to when we wrap it around the top of our doll. Next, we're going to roll out some white fondant, cut out a hexagon shape, and place that onto the doll's upper half. We're going to move on to that next step and grab some yellow and pink fondant and begin to dress the middle portion of our doll cake with a yellow fondant strand and a pink fondant strand. Now you can do this either in 2 halves and bring them together behind the doll cake, bring them together in the middle, or you can just use one long piece and just kind of wrap them around so that both points meet in the front of the cake. Once we have both strands of our fondant on our doll cake, we're going to go ahead, grab a small yellow fondant crescent moon, bring it right to the front of the cake and place that centered and on top of our yellow and pink fondant strands. we're gonna move on to that next step. And that is going to be to cover our fondant with a very thin layer of piping gel. So grab your piping gel, grab your paintbrush, and let's get going on this fondant. Now, usually I would use water. It is my go-to every time I'm working with fondant and I want to stick things to fondant. But because we are going to be using edible glitter on our cake, I wanted to make sure that the edible glitter actually stuck to the cake. Because the piping gel is not going to harden and weigh down on our fondant, I thought this would be a nice way to test out to make sure that the piping gel holds the edible glitter in place when we move to that step. After that piping gel is on your fondant, grab your edible glitter, grab a paintbrush, and let's get started on getting this cake nice and sparkly. Now, when it comes to actually buying your edible glitter, be sure that you are actually looking at the labels for the type of glitter you want to use on this cake. Most edible glitters and luster dust should state edible on the label. If the label just says non-toxic or for decorative purposes only and does not include an ingredient list, the glitter should not be used directly on foods and should not be consumed at all. If the glitter you'd like to use is edible, it will likely say somewhere on its packaging edible glitter and include a list of ingredients that can commonly include sugar, cornstarch, maybe some color additives. Either way, don't be fooled by products that say non-toxic on the label. Just because it's non-toxic does not mean it's edible. For example, Play-Doh, non-toxic. You're not going to grab a chunk and eat that for breakfast. Luckily, it's pretty easy to figure out what's edible and what's purely aesthetic once you know what to look for. So always be sure to check the label and what's actually marked on the item itself. Now, with that all out of the way, for the glitter on our doll cake, we're going to go ahead and start with a border of blue glitter on the bottom of our cake. Once you're happy with that blue glitter, we're going to go ahead, move up a tiny little bit, grab some pink glitter, and we're going to follow that same step. We're just going to take our paintbrush, we're going to take our pink glitter, and we're going to go ahead and brush on that glitter all around our cake. Once you're happy with both your blue and pink glitter, we're going to go ahead, take some more of our piping gel, brush that on to the rest of the bottom half of our doll cake, because now we're going to go ahead and we're going to take our yellow edible glitter and brush that on from the top of our pink glitter band all the way to the bottom of our pink fondant. And because we have a lot of area to cover with our glitter, I would suggest starting with a bigger brush to get your glitter from your bowl to your cake before moving to a smaller brush to kind of just clean up the edges. We're going to grab more fondant and we're going to continue to decorate to really make sure that this is fully Sailor Moon inspired. So let's go ahead and start by grabbing some pink fondant and wrapping our cake so that the points meet center and in front of our cake. After we added on our pink fondant, we're going to go ahead and start with our Eternal Moon fondant brooch. Now, I'll be sure to throw full detailed directions on how to make these fondant decorations in the recipe link down below. We're going to go ahead, we're going to start with a yellow fondant heart and follow that up with a smaller fondant heart. Next, let's go ahead and take some white fondant wings and add them to the bottom left and the bottom right of our fondant brooch on our cake. For the rest of our brooch, let's go ahead, grab more of our yellow fondant, and by just cutting out some basic shapes, we're going to go ahead and bring those all together and try to capture all things that are eternal Sailor Moon. After you are happy with how your fondant decorations have turned out, we're going to go ahead, add a little bit of sparkle, take some edible candy gemstones, which you can find usually at your local candy store or your local hobby store. For me, it was Michael's, and I'm so excited that we actually get to use them in the kitchen because they've been sitting in my pantry for so long. But we're going to take them and we are going to go ahead and just outline our Eternal Moon fondant brooch to bring a little more extra sparkle to our cake. Let's go ahead and take our fondant and begin to decorate the top half of our doll cake. So first, we're going to start with some blue fondant and wrap that around the shoulders of our doll. Then we're going to take some white fondant and gently shape them so that they resemble wings and place them right in the top front of our cake. To top it off, we're going to take a yellow edible candy gemstone and place that right on top in the center of our wings. Then to pull it all together, we're going to go ahead, we're going to give our doll a little fondant necklace and some pink fondant armbands to really bring together Eternal Sailor Moon's outfit. We're going to move on to that next step and use some rice paper to cut out wings for our cake. Now, rice paper is very inexpensive, it's very easy to use, and it is edible. Doesn't taste like anything, but it is edible. So we're gonna go ahead and we're just gonna take an edible marker, trace out some wings, cut them out, and stick them to the back of your doll cake. Once your cake is fully decorated, that's it, you're done. Pat yourself on the back. You've made your very own Sailor Moon inspired cake that is fit for the Moon Kingdom itself. And this is gonna be a part of a huge Sailor Moon cake series. We've done Sailor Moon cakes on the channel before. I had fun. I'm such a big Moony, huge Sailor Moon fan. So I was thinking, sketching up some cake designs. I was like, you know what? Let's do maybe another 24 Sailor Moon inspired cakes. So be sure to head to those comments down below and let me know your favorite Sailor Moon scout so we can go ahead and make sure that she gets their very own cake. And that is a wrap. Thank you so much for hanging out today in my kitchen and checking out this amazing new recipe. Don't forget, if you want even more, like, subscribe, click the bell to receive notifications every time I post a new video. And if you whip this up right at home, don't forget to give a tag on Instagram. You know, let me see what you're baking up in your kitchen. Alrighty, well, I'm gonna grab a slice of this cake, enjoy the day, enjoy the weather. Hope you get to do the same. And as always, I will see you in the next video very, very soon. Bye-bye.